Hello, how's everyone doing today? Today I had already previously recorded this episode, but I wanted to re-record it because I just felt that I could put it into better words as to what I meant by what I was saying. Yeah, I I just wanted to be like more concise with it, more overall clear. But today, what has been troubling me for a little bit has been just thinking about like the troubles that I have personally like run into in high school, and as well as just like what I noticed during high school. And it's not just high school; it's just the older you get. Well, there's like definitely a sweet spot between probably like 15 years old to like 22 years old, and that is probably like the most hedonistic, nihilistic years of your life. Not that you'll necessarily become someone with those kind of ideologies, but you are surrounded with it more than you have ever been. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about it and talk about why I personally don't think that that is correct. I don't want this video to be like arguments against atheism. That's not really the point. The point is more like speaking on for Christians, showing why we are not supposed to, rather than going against atheism. But I guess if any atheists have any thoughts, I would be willing to have a civil discourse in the comments. Obviously, if not, if you don't want to have civil discourse, then I just won't respond. But yeah, let's get into it. I recently had a conversation with a girl in my school regarding um, what was it? Premarital sex. Um, what I was telling her was that, yeah, I understand that not everyone is on a journey of faith, and obviously God does not force us to be on this journey of faith. Um, but it there is a reason as to why we're not supposed to do that, and apart from the violation it is against God, it's also a violation against us. We're violating ourselves. We're hurting ourselves in the process, right? We are, according to the Catechism, we are creatures made for God. And as Saint Augustine says, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So we're made in the image of God for God, right? So anything against Him is also violation towards ourselves, right? And I understand not everyone is a Christian, so maybe not everyone will believe that, but what she was saying and what I feel is consistent, just in all my personal experience, she's saying, yeah, ever since I did it with my boyfriend, the relationship hasn't been the same. Um, and I think that's why the rule as to why, hey, we can't have premarital sex is so important, because it is something sacred meant to be only between, um, obviously, a husband and a wife. But why is it meant to be between a husband and a wife? It's meant to be between a husband and a wife because of how sacred it is, and also God, through that time, makes us prepared for that sacredness, right? We can't be treating it as if it's nothing. And obviously, you just see, like, when you do something so special with someone like it's nothing, you can see how much it affects people. People, they become attached to that person, and stuff like that is just overall very dangerous. And that's one of my main arguments, but it led me to a deeper thought, and it's why why us as high schoolers or younger people, why do we try for these such worldly things that you see older people usually try not to do, and kind of move away from that? and obviously you don't do it when you're younger. You're like, when you're like 10 years old. I'm thinking why? We're it's why I love the Book of Confession so much. Augustine talks about how he tried to find love and he tried to find peace. He tried to find happiness all through the things of the world. And obviously, he only ever found it when it was for God. And a lot of it's due to our original sin, and a lot of it's just due to hormones and us being teenagers, rebellious teenagers, wanting to do these things that make us feel good in the moment. And I think a lot of it, I feel like it's a lot more, maybe it's always been there, but I personally feel like it's a lot more in recent years because of social media, obviously, and that culture is just glorified of, whether it may be hookup culture, drinking, partying. I understand that's been there before, but I feel like it's more glorified with social media, as well as there's this attitude of you only live once. And that attitude can be so dangerous if it's used in the incorrect manner. That incorrect manner being you only live once, so might as well do everything you possibly can, whether that be drinking, whether that be doing those kinds of things. But we can flip that attitude into a better way and use that as we only have one life to make that pleasing to God, one life to put our faith and receive the grace of God by having faith and obviously fulfilling His commands. And it made me wonder, yes, we are, rebellious teenagers, and, whether it may be hormones and also just due to the facts of our original sin, but what are we seeking? Because in the end, as humans, whether you're a teenager or an adult, what you're doing may be different, but you're all seeking the same thing, and that is happiness. But then I thought, well, what's the point of that? If, in my personal definition of happiness is only a temporary feeling. And just reflecting on my personal life and just the other people that I've talked to, what they are going for is more peace. Seems like they're talking about. And it made me think so much, right? And it made me also, again, reflect on my own life. I've been at peace before in my life. I'm not going to say before I met God that I was not at peace sometimes. But what it made me realize is that peace is a shallow kind of peace. That peace is not profound. That peace relies on circumstance rather than being, whether things change around me, that peace is unchanged because of an unchanging factor, and that factor being God. So me relying on, okay, well, if I have this one girl in my life, or if I have this, for some people, maybe this car, maybe this house, and maybe this kind of money, it may be whatever that may be. What happens when that gets taken away from you? In my experience, after my conversion, I've been unhappy at times. I've felt depressed at times, but that didn't mean I wasn't at peace, because I knew I had God in my life, and that made all the difference, right? Things felt, no matter how bad a thing was in that moment, I felt like I could always overcome it. And it made me think of, it wasn't a parable, but it was a kind of analogy that Jesus talked about. I believe it was in Matthew 7. In Matthew 7, Jesus talks about whoever obeys these words that I am teaching, whoever hears them and obeys them, is like someone who built their house on like a strong foundation, because it was built on the rock, that rock being Jesus. And no, that's not an argument against the papacy, by the way. But and then he switches on to saying, whoever doesn't listen to them is like someone who built their house on sand. It'll blow away. And that put things into perspective for me about how listening to Jesus, not be like, he doesn't order us to do things just because. Like, it's not just because, it's because they're good for us, right? Those things are good for us. What he commands us to do and what he keeps us from is bad for us. Not just a sin against him, but it's a sin against us, as we are made for God and made in the image of God. Now, what that analogy that he told was talking about was, if you build it on that strong foundation, what I talked about earlier is that unchanging factor, which is God, then no matter what life throws at you, it's a firm foundation. But if you don't obey him, if you don't build that relationship with him, then it's like a house made of straw, a house made of sand. It just blows away. That's what I meant by it relies on circumstance, because you're relying on the circumstances around you for peace rather than relying on something bigger than that. And it brings me as well as to how can we build that relationship with God? How can we build that relationship with Christ? And obviously, as a Catholic, I believe that is through the Catholic Church. Obviously, if you're not Catholic, I as well believe that you can build that relationship, receive grace still, but to come to that fullness of the grace through the sacraments, being reconciled to Jesus Christ, as well as receiving his body and his blood as he commanded, to be sanctified, to spiritually nourish us, which is why Jesus and the new covenant is such a gift, and it is completely and fully conveyed through the Catholic Church, right? Jesus, this is Matthew 8. He's riding on the boat with his disciples, and he's sleeping, right? And the waves start hitting hard. The wind starts hitting hard. His disciples are fearing for their lives. And they wake Jesus up, and he says, "You men of little faith." He calms the storm. What many of the church fathers saw that as, and interpreted that text as, is a symbolism of how Jesus works in our life, right? If we don't call on him, it's like he's asleep. Obviously he can still bless us even if we don't call on him. But when we call on him, he calms the storm around us, which is the obstacles of life. And that is the assistance of Jesus and his Spirit and the new covenant that is completely conveyed in the Catholic Church, right? As Paul talks about in Romans, I believe. That and Galatians as well. He talks about the law was insufficient. All it did was make sins more clear. It didn't give us any assistance to combat these sins, to live a more full life, to live like life to its fullest. That is only through the new covenant, where we become adopted sons of God, where we can fully receive Jesus in the Eucharist, where we can become adopted through baptism, where we can be reconciled. That is fullness of grace. In the new covenant, we have that assistance and help of Jesus. And that's why I believe that it's fully in the Catholic Church. And with that, this hedonistic and nihilistic worldview is put to an end because you feel something more. You feel a true love, a real profound love, and an unchanging love, right? God will love you more than any person ever can. And the mistake I used to make is I used to think that, well, I can't give my all to God. That means I can't give my all to my girlfriend. That means I can't give my all to these people I love. But that was the wrong attitude, right? Because God taught me how to love. God taught me how to love to the fullest. My love for God grew my heart in its love. And I learned to accept others' imperfections and love them as they are because God did the same for me. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little yap session, but I did put it in a lot better words this time. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And I hope you guys just give me your thoughts in the comments about the things I had to say. Yeah, I completely and fully believe that with listening to Jesus, he gives us that foundation that we cannot give ourselves. When we rely on ourselves too much, we're just not strong enough, and he gives us that extra strength that is needed with the Holy Spirit. And if you don't believe me, put your faith in him. Put your faith in him that he has blessed us through the sacraments of the church, and I promise you it will not fail. So glory be to God. Amen.